boys. I'm so glad you're here with me this morning because this is the space we get to learn about God. It's the first week of October, which means it's a brand new life app. What's a life app, you ask? It's a characteristic of God. It's also something God does in us to change the world around us. And October's life app is, you ready? It's integrity. Choosing to be truthful in whatever you say and do. Integrity is about more than telling the truth. That's part of it, to be sure, but it's also about being truthful in every part of your life. And this morning's lesson is a really great way to explain this. And our lesson comes to us from the book of Daniel, and this book is found in the first part of the Bible. Do you know what that's called? The Old Testament. Now, over 2,000 years ago, there was a king in the country of Babylon, and his name was King Nebuchadnezzar. Isn't that a fun name to say? Let's say it together. King Nebuchadnezzar. And he conquered the land of Judah, which was where God's people lived. And they brought some people back to Babylon, and the king instructed for some of the young people of Judah to be brought to the palace. He wanted to teach them all about Babylon, the writings, the language, the history, and the culture. And after 3 years of training, they would become servants to the king. And keep in mind, he did not want them to be overworked, underfed, unhealthy servants. No, King Nebuchadnezzar wanted them to be just like Babylonians, healthy, well-fed, and educated. And Daniel and 3 of his friends were among those that were chosen. They were given new names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel was given a new name as well, but I'm going to keep things simple, and I'm just going to call him Daniel. Also, it's a really hard name to pronounce. Just saying. Okay, now here's the thing. Babylonian culture was very different than the culture of God's people. And for one thing, they ate different foods, which might not seem like a big deal. You go to a different country or even a different state, and you could have different foods. But for God's people, there were certain foods that were unclean and off limits. These were foods that God had told them not to eat. And Daniel and his friends loved God and wanted to honor and obey him. So when they were given food from the king's table, they had a problem. It wasn't food that they could eat. It would dishonor God to eat that kind of food. So they asked for permission to not eat the food the king had offered them. Well, the king's official said no, because he didn't want them to get weak. If they didn't eat, then they would look weak compared to the others in that training program. So they still didn't want to eat that food. So Daniel ended up talking to one of the guards and asked him to give them only vegetables and water for 10 days. And if that sounds like that would not be fun, that is really what Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego wanted. They really wanted vegetables and water for 10 days. So after 10 days passed, Daniel and his friends, they were still healthy, they were well fed, and they looked better than any of the other trainees. So the guard said, okay, you can keep eating this way. That's fine. And that's not all that happened. So we're going to look at a verse from Daniel. Ready? Read along with me at home out loud if you want to. God gave knowledge and understanding to these 4 young men. So they understood all kinds of writings and subjects. And Daniel could understand all kinds of visions and dreams. That's Daniel 1, verse 17. And the NIRV is New International Reader's Version. So at the end of their training, Daniel and his friends were brought before the king. And the king was shocked. He couldn't find anyone as strong and smart as they were. So Daniel and his friends became the king's most trusted advisors. But even though they served the king of Babylon, they never stopped loving and obeying God. They still served God. See, Daniel and his friends knew what was most important. They knew they could trust God no matter what. They had the integrity to stay truthful to what they knew God wanted them to do, to what they knew God wanted them to be. And even though they were in a land that wasn't their own, and even though they were around a bunch of people that were doing things that they knew they shouldn't do, they didn't want to do those things because they wanted to be who they really were. And we can choose to live with integrity too. We can choose to be truthful in every part of our lives. Bottom line, be truthful with your whole life. Let's say that again. Be truthful with your whole life. You don't have to be afraid to be yourself. Whoever you are, whoever you're with, be you. You don't have to pretend to be somebody you're not. Just be who God wants you to be, who God made you to be, and then trust Him to take care of everything else. Now we're going to close with our memory verse. And boys and girls, teens and grown-ups, let's say this out loud together, okay? Ready? Here we go. Anyone who lives without blame walks safely, but anyone who takes a crooked path will get caught. Proverbs 10:9, Nerve. Now, one of the activities in your boxes this month has to do with crooked paths and straight paths, and it involves pipe cleaners. I think you're going to have fun with it. And if your family hasn't received a monthly box yet and would like to, just follow this link below. We have boxes for preschoolers and for elementary kids each month. And I hope, boys and girls, you have a wonderful, wonderful time with your activities.